take the lead.
Okay. All right. So we're going to get started. Our first presentation today is feeding infants and young children, and Jennifer is going to do that presentation. Let me go ahead and share my screen so that I can make sure that we are ready to go. Can you all see my screen? Yes? Yes, okay.
Ms. St. Peter, I'm sorry to interrupt for a second. Please, if you are on this Zoom, it is important that you turn your video on, okay? We have to be able to see you. We have to be able to see that you're actually following the training, okay? If you don't have your video on, we cannot confirm that you attended this training. Very important to have your video on. Thank you.
Okay, I will turn it over to Jennifer.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So we're going to talk about feeding infants and young children. Next slide. This training is just to provide an overview of our guidelines when we're feeding infants and young children. Next slide. I know a lot of our teachers that are in our infant rooms know this information, but it's also important for everybody to know this information, just in case you are put into ratio for whatever reason in those rooms. So they do have an internal system that ensures infants are receiving the correct bottle. First thing that they do is they check the name and the date on the bottle. Second, they should pause before placing the bottle in the infant's mouth. Does the name match the bottle and the face of the infant? Doing this name to face check each and every time can prevent mix-ups. And that's important because babies can't tell you, no, stop, that's not my milk. Third, they should be verifying with the other teachers to ensure that the infant is receiving the correct bottle. I know when I go into the infant rooms, I'm very, very careful, and I do ask them, like, this bottle, this baby, this bottle, this baby. So it's important that we do that so that they get the right bottle. Also, another thing that they have in the infant rooms is by their feeding area, they have like a picture of the baby and a list of foods that they've received already, and then like what they can have and what they can't have. And it's on, it's by their feeding area, so you can always reference that if you go in there. Next slide. Infants who are less than 8 months old and who are unable to sit up independently are held for bottle and spoon feedings. Bottles are never propped up. Bottle sippy cups or cups are never in the cribs. Bottles, sippy cups, and cups are never allowed while infants are crawling or walking. Can anybody unmute themselves and tell me why this is important?
So babies don't choke. So babies don't choke.
Correct, correct. So next slide. There's two types of bottles that are appropriate in the classrooms. They're going to be either the plastic bottles or the Pyrex glass bottles. Just FYI. Next slide. Okay, we do not use these items in program. We don't use boiling water. We don't use like a bottle warmer, a crock pot, or a microwave to warm any bottles. Can anybody unmute themselves and tell me why we don't use these items?
There's no consistency in the temperature of the liquid.
When they're warmed that way, they can create hot spots in the bottle. And when we're feeding the bottle to the babies, it can actually burn them with those hot spots. So, and it can also break down the milk proteins in breast milk bottles. And so it has to be the correct temperature. Next slide. So what we do use are baby barisas. Think of them as like, it's like a Keurig for baby formula. It can store the formula. It holds the water for the formula. It dispenses it at the correct temperature of 98 degrees, I think it is. All they do is put the bottle in there. They select the ounces that are needed and they press start and magically it's done. There are 3 of these in each of the infant rooms. One of them is for the Similac Advance, which is the CDC formula that we provide. The other is for Similac Soy, which is, again, we provide. The other is for warming pre-made formula or human milk bottles. In order to do that, so they take the one that's just for warming and they put it underneath there. It dispenses the water, and then they place the bottle in a container for 5 minutes only. And the bottle should be ready for the baby to have. It's not gonna make it super, super, super warm. It's just to pretty much like take the chill off of it. And it's only good for like 5 minutes. So next slide. This is really important. So again, they have other safety precautions. Bottle labeling is really important. If you see a bottle that has red tape, that's breast milk. If you see a bottle with blue tape, that's formula that was brought from home. These 2 will have like the name of the baby, how many ounces, the date and the time that it was prepared, and the parents fill those out, okay? If you see a bottle with yellow tape, that is the Similac Soy, that's ours. And then there's the Similac Advanced in green tape, which again, we provide. It would have the baby's name, how many ounces, the date and time that it was prepared. And these 2 have the teacher's initials on it because we prepared it. So it's really important to be familiar with this bottle labeling system. Next slide. When do we introduce solid foods to infants? Unless it's recommended by a medical professional, cow's milk is not offered to infants who are less than 12 months of age. Also, parents must introduce infant foods at home first before it's offered at the CDC. It's also recommended that solid foods are not introduced no sooner than 4 months of age. Can anybody unmute themselves and tell me why it's important for parents to introduce the foods at home first?
They can let us know if there's any reaction to any of the food, if there's any allergies, and if there's any concerns that they have regarding the food they're providing for their kid. That way we can know what to do and, you know, tell the parents the process that we have in order for the center to not provide the food for the kid and stuff like that.
Absolutely correct. Next slide. So now we're going to talk about childhood nutrition. Eating healthy in childhood is very important because it provides proper growth and development for children. Next slide. So this is coming from the USDA, which is what we currently follow at the CDC. The kitchen provides the correct serving spoons that are used for each of the items. So on this chart, you can see there's 2 in the white column. It's what was previously used, and then in like the baby blue column is like the updated version, which they are pretty much the same. I didn't see any that were like really changed. So we have ages 1 to 2, and then we have ages 3 to 5. I know sometimes you guys call into the kitchen and thinking that the children are not given enough food. I think the same thing, but according to the USDA, they are given the correct portions for those meal items. Next slide. So here's a sample meal portion for ages 1 to 2. If you notice in the middle of this, there's a plate of food. It does not look like a whole lot. I even commented, I was like, that's not enough to feed a 1 and 2-year-old. No way. According to the USDA, it actually is. But they're offered a variety of foods throughout the day. Next slide. Again, here's a sample meal portion for ages 3 to 5. Again, it doesn't look like a whole lot of food is offered in the middle right there on that plate, but they are getting the correct portions that they need for their bodies. Next slide. Along with eating, it's important to that we need to reduce the risk of children choking. So children under the age of 4 are at a higher risk of choking while eating. And yes, I know in these pictures, we do not serve grapes and we do not serve hot dogs, but this came from the USDA as just examples. And you can see in the examples how it's telling you to slice the items smaller and how they should be. So like a ½ inch is like barely nothing. And then for cubed items, it's the same thing. You want to make sure that they're not as wide around as a nickel. So you want to cut them down so that way they can easily go down the child's throat. Next slide. So how can we teach these good eating habits? Whether you are an infant teacher, pre-taught teacher, toddler teacher, or preschool teacher, we can sit and eat with the children at meal times and snacks. One of the best ways to model good eating habits is through family style dining. Provide foods as part of meals and snacks that are served at the table. So you want to eat exactly what they're eating. When serving infants, we don't prop up the bottle on a pillow or any other items. Also with that, we can still be very meaningful when we're bottle feeding a baby, right? And for an example, my daughter let me borrow her favorite baby. This is Lily. And so like when you're bottle feeding a baby, you know, you can talk to the baby, look at the baby, everything. You don't have to just kind of sit there and, you know, not really be present. You can be fully engaged while you're bottle feeding a baby. You want to allow plenty of time for meals and snacks. Model safe behavior for children to follow, including eating slowly, taking small bites, chewing the food completely before swallowing. You can encourage the older children to serve as role models for the younger children. Also, you can sit picky eaters next to the non-picky eaters, and believe it or not, those picky eaters see that those other eaters, oh, well, they're trying those foods. I can try them too. Next slide. Our goal as teachers are to make children independent by giving them the tools and knowledge that they need to succeed. Remember, feeding times or meal times should be an opportunity to strengthen child and adult relationships. Next slide. And these are my resources that I used. Some of them did come from the new March 2022 instructional guide for feeding infants and young children. And the other information came from the USDA, which we currently follow.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions?
I don't have a question. This is Miss Sharon. I just have a little bit of comment that I think that, and this is nothing towards anybody. I think the trainers need to walk around inside of the classroom during mealtime to observe some of the ladies, because I feel like some of the ladies, and this is only on the toddler wing. I can't talk about the other wings. That when it's mealtime, they sit with the kids. Sometimes they don't get a plate. Sometimes they get a plate, but they never touch the plate. And I think in order for the kids to want to eat the meal, you have to eat some of it. I mean, you just got to suck it up, eat a bean, eat a whatever, but you have to do that. You have to model for them, because if you don't model for them, they will not eat the food.
That's
You're
100%.
absolutely correct, Miss Sharon.
So I'm
wholeheartedly
sorry
agree.
if that bothers anybody or steps on anybody's toes. It's just that it bothers me when I see the ladies and they don't eat, and so I tell them, I say, you need to get a plate. But then they never touch the plate, and they'll say, well, I don't eat here, or something of that nature. But it's not about you. It's about the kids.
You're right.
So,
And they're watching every movement that we do, whether we think that they are or they're not.
mhm.
And we have to be better role models. That was great advice. I appreciate it.
Staff, if you are allergic to one of the menu items, please do not feel compelled to eat it.
You can absolutely like push it around, on the
Yeah,
plate. You
yeah,
can
of
stab it
course.
with a
If you're
fork.
allergic to something, I wouldn't expect somebody to eat it. But I'm just talking about in general.
Going back to what we Santo mentioned about the allergy, indeed, if you are allergic to certain types of food and you cannot model, that is something that needs to be communicated to the trainers and to management. Communication is key, because we are not going to demand of you to do something that may make you sick. So please, it is very important that we communicate with the trainers once again and management. Thank
Yeah.
you.
One thing that I used to do when I was in the classroom, so dairy really upsets my stomach. And so I actually would sit and tell the children, Miss Beverly cannot have milk because it will make my tummy upset. Sometimes we have foods that make our tummies upset or that we're allergic to. So I'm going to go ahead and get some water because that's not going to make my tummy upset. So it's important to also demonstrate that, yes, there are food allergies and it's okay to be allergic to food or food that does give you an upset tummy.
Yeah, the kids do pretty good with that. They know I can't have corn, and when they get corn, they go, Miss Britta can't eat corn. It'll make her sick.
Yeah. Yeah,
love
they
that.
know. And when I was in the toddler room, they would tell me, no milk for Miss Beverly.
And make sure that when you're modeling with family style dining and stuff, that you're getting the same portions that the children are getting. This is their lunchtime, not yours. You're just modeling what they should be doing.
Perfect. Is there any other questions or any comments that anybody wants to add on? If not, we can move on.
Me.
Go ahead.
For the baby bottles, the glass baby bottles, we have to use the silicone sleeve. We cannot have them like in the classroom without the silicone sleeve.
I'm not 100% sure about that. I know that we've had the Pyrex bottles in the program. Previously, I know I was working with Miss Henderson and Miss Alana and Miss Maria to try to figure out what the best process is for those Pyrex bottles. Ultimately, that one parent, they did end up bringing
with the sleeves,
so that if it did fall or break, then it's kind of more contained
in the sleeve.
So if anybody wants a copy of the new instructional guide that came out in March of 2022, you can always reach out to us and we can give you a copy of that instructional guide. Air Force has kind of changed their policies a little bit, and all these instructional guides that we used to go over with and then have you sign at the bottom, we no longer have to do that. So it's more of a resource that we can utilize to make sure that we're doing everything that we need to do to make sure that we are keeping children safe and meeting their developmental needs. So if no more questions, we'll move on.
I have a question.
Okay.
It's about the portions. I know that you guys say the USDA suggests certain amounts for the kid, but in the portions that we're getting, the little bowls or whatever, are we getting just one portion or we getting like
So you're getting the amount of the portion size that the USDA has required for that meal, right? So if the USDA says children only get 1 ounce of meat, like basically like a little bit of meat, then they're only receiving that 1 portion size. Now in the AFI, it does state that you can ask for seconds on fruits and vegetables. And so you can always call down to the kitchen and say, hey, is there any way I can have more peas? And the kitchen should be able to supply you with those peas. But other things like the proteins and stuff like that, then it's just that 1 portion that they're allowed for. Any other questions? No? Okay, so at this time, the kitchen staff are able to leave. The rest of the training pertains to either front desk clerks or classroom teachers. So the kitchen staff, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you being here and logging in. And we'll move on to our next.
You're welcome. Thank you.